the On the Mic podcast, and it's a massive week in combat sports. You've got Bellator rising, you've got UFC 291, which is what we're here to talk about, and the BMF title is back on the line. And we also have one of the best boxing matches, really not only this year, but in quite a few years, Terence Crawford, Errol, Spence. And to break pretty much all of that down and talk to me about his career is someone I have a lot of respect for. And when he agreed to come on the show, well, I almost shit myself. He's the one and only. You can hear him all over the UFC and Invicta. He is the one and only cage announcer, Joe Martinez. Sir, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm good. And again, truly appreciate you coming on. Let me just ask this right off the bat. When it comes to a week like this in combat sports, how exciting is it for you? Obviously, you work for certain promotions, but it's not like an all-star weekend or like Super Bowl week, but there's something a little special when everyone's doing something in the combat sports world.
It's great. I mean, if you're a part of it, as a fan, though, I think it's even better. If I was working it, I don't know if I'd be stressing a little bit because it's such a massive weekend. So now I get to just be a fan, sit back and watch it, being at home this weekend. And actually, I took my family down to Newport Beach. We're down here for the summer. Dude, it's like 73 degrees here and 117 in Vegas. So we're like, let's get out of town for a while. So it'll be nice to just chill in the nice air and just take in some fights.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, and it's pretty bad over here, pretty humid here in Chicago. So I'm with you. I'm not in Vegas, which is obviously great. We're giving that heat, but it's such a fun weekend, and there's so much to talk about. And we could really just jump right into it with UFC 291, Poirier, Gaethje 2. And the BMF title on the line. I understand bringing back the BMF title. I love what Jorge Masvidal said. Fly me to Salt Lake. I'll wrap the belt around the winner. Dana White said he's all for it. I don't know if that's the plan, but no two better fighters in any weight class, in my opinion, to run the BMF title again. How do you feel about this fight and them attaching the BMF title to it?
I'm indifferent when it comes to that title, but I'm glad it was created, and I'm glad it wasn't a one-off like we had anticipated it being initially. So, and yeah, you're right. I mean, two guys that are really performing well at this time in their career. Not to pick a fighter, but I think Poirier's on fire right now, and he's going to be tough to beat Saturday.
Yeah, and I don't ever expect anyone who actually works to make any picks. So I appreciate that. That's awesome, because I think I'm leaning that way as well. I just think at some point in time, certain fighters just hit. I won't even call it the peak, but they're untouchable at certain moments in their career, and I think Dustin Poirier is at that point in his career. But bringing back the BMF title, I definitely agree with you. I'll go back to another thing Masvidal said. He said every winner should wrap the belt around the next winner's waist. I think that's a very cool kind of pass it off. So I think it's very fun. But this is such an exciting card. When you are sitting cage side or announcing, but I'll say sitting cage side first, and then I'll ask you about announcing. When you're sitting cage side and you see two guys, this is no disrespect to any other fighters, but there are so many times in a Dustin Poirier or a Justin Gaethje fight where you go, holy shit, how are they still standing? What is driving them to go to this level? To a level where sometimes people who are around the cage go, I can't believe what I just saw. And it's not even from a sporting perspective. It's from a human nature perspective. How did that human pull that out of them? What is it like for you when you see those kind of wars, no matter if it's Poirier, Gaethje, or anyone, when you're sitting cage side?
It makes me truly appreciate that I'm not the one in there having to perform. And really, when I say appreciate, it's because the work ethic that these guys have to be at such a high level and perform. I mean, you can go out and be in the best shape of your life, but I mean, there's a different gear these guys can find that is unnatural, to say the least. And to witness it, I mean, as a fan, even if I'm working, I'm still a fan, because I mean, there's so many, oh my God, moments that you're constantly blown away, and it doesn't have to be that major a BMF fight or a title fight. You see it often, even in preliminary bouts where these guys, I mean, they're throwing it in the wind. And I remember the first trip we took outside of, well, personally, one of the initial trips we took outside of the Apex was to Austin last year. And that card, it was like animals uncaged, it's like, we have freedom now and we're going to go and we're going to eat, and the performance on that card was one of the most exciting events I've ever been a part of in boxing or in MMA. And I mean, I don't know how many bonuses went out that night, but if every fighter didn't get one, I would be surprised. It was incredible.
Yeah, I know we're just coming off the heels of UFC 290 earlier this month, and I know people are crowning it as one of the very best events in UFC history, and it falls right in line with that. To that now, talking about what you do, and I've watched other interviews with you, and you've talked about putting on the voice, and I like the fact that I'm just talking to Joe Martinez, and I don't have to, you're not putting on the voice, and I appreciate that. I actually like that. But when you have to put on the voice, and obviously, Bruce Buffer is everyone knows who Bruce and Michael Buffer and all that, and everyone knows you as well. Bruce been on the podcast a couple times, but when you have to go through those moments, and you're announcing and you're introducing these world-class fighters, how, if you can describe, how is it to not be a fan, but understand you're now the voice for the fans, if that makes any sense?
I think for me, it's always been the same. I don't try to pedestal anything that I do in any way because I know it's not about me. And I take a lot of pride in that, in being just the announcer. And if you remember me, great. If you don't, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't have a social media. I don't care if anybody's giving me a like. I just want to do a great job. And if I can give them an introduction that helps them in any way be more ready to go, then hey, I've done my job. And that's where my focus is. It's not about on what I do. Of course, if I say something wrong, then I'm the one that wears it, and I'm more bothered than anybody. But I'm also reminded by myself that, hey, I'm human. I make mistakes. There's nothing robotic about me. And I just try to stay in my own wheelhouse. And if I go outside of that and get uncomfortable, that's stretching, my limits. And I don't really like to do that. So I pretty much keep everything the same level. If it's the first fight of the night or it's the last fight of the night, yeah, the last one gets a little bit more love because it is the main event. But typically, I'm going to give everybody the same introduction, whether it's, Masvidal or if it's John Johnson, who's making his debut, right. He's going to get the same love. And for me, I love debuts, bro. I love giving a fighter his card, my little note card. If he wins a fight and it's his debut, I'm like, hey, here's the card, just to commemorate that moment for him, because I think that can be special. And maybe it is or it isn't to him. And if it is, sweet. If not, hey, throw it away. But at least it's something for them to take home, other than a paycheck and a W. But yeah, I just want to give quality every time I'm doing anything, whether it's making dinner or if it's watching somebody make their own dreams come true. I want to be the best that I can be.
That's actually really cool that you do that. And I give you the highest props for that. I think that's awesome. When you talk about doing the best you can do, if you want to become my life coach, I'm sure I can scrounger some money together because I love the way you just approach that. That's awesome. I do want to get your thoughts on a couple other fights here, but I want to just talk about your career. And I know you've had your hand in a lot of different things. How do you feel about where you're at this stage in your career?
I'm so happy. I'm truly blessed, and I give just glory and thanks to God. No cliches involved. If you were to look at me 15 years ago, 20 years ago, even starting out in boxing, I've been in boxing for 24 years now. But prior to that, I was in baseball, and I did 22 years of pro baseball announcing. And I've always said yes to opportunities because I felt like for every opportunity I have, if I say no, someone else is stepping in. And I look at it as reps. You've got to there's a lot of guys I get emails from, and they're like, "Hey man, I've been doing this for 5 years and I'm getting nowhere." And I'm like, "Well, what are you looking for? Like, what do you want to do?" And if it's like, "Well, I want to announce in the UFC," well, hey man, that's a great goal, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. You don't get drafted out of high school and pitch in the big leagues tomorrow. It takes a lot of work, and you got to put those reps in. So keep saying yes to opportunities and don't ever get above a show. If you think, you're in a place that is below you, then you'll be humbled quickly. And the no's will start to come because your character will be revealed. And I believe character in life matters more than ability. You can have a great ability, a great voice, speak well, and be a complete jerk, and you'll get a lot of no's. You'll turn people off quickly. It's like a beautiful woman with a bad attitude. She's fun to look at, but beyond that, there's no content that I want to be a part of, because she could be a vampire just draining life out of me. And not saying I'm looking for a woman. I've got an amazing wife. So I'm just saying, stating in general that stay humble, keep working hard, and don't get above. Don't get above. It's kind of an ugly way to walk. And I truly appreciate athletes, actors, celebrities, anybody that can stay level-headed and still go out and be the top of the food chain, because that to me is character revealed. And I don't believe money turns people into a-holes. I believe a-holes are a-holes, but it reveals character the more money you have, right? And if you can stay the same person you were when you were collecting unemployment or when you were grinding, bro. I remember getting a phone call, doing a show. I was doing shows like every week for like almost a year and a half. And I got a phone call one day and says, "Hey, we're not doing a show this week." I said, "Okay, well, when?" "Well, next week." Then the next week came, we didn't do a show. Well, then it was 2 months later and we still hadn't done that show. And I'm thinking, shoot, now what am I going to do? So I had to go out and just really find my way. And it wasn't in announcing. I was on Craigslist looking for jobs. Here I am, a college degree. I got a BA in communications, but I couldn't communicate with anybody because there were no opportunities. So I'm out working construction jobs, sweeping floors, tying rebar, anything I could do to make a buck. But that wasn't necessarily below me. It was enhancing me. It was showing me that, you know what, this life we have is all temporary, and how we walk it out is going to matter more when we face that struggle. Because when you struggle, when you see a man and he's being tested, how he responds is his character. And I want my character to be the same, whether I'm at the top and I'm rolling along or I'm at the bottom. I want you to see the same Joe that you see at every level. And if I can do that, then I'm doing fine. And God has really brought me down to maintain a level of respect and courtesy that I feel is the way I want to portray and show my kids and other kids and other announcers that want to get into the game. Like, this is all temporary and it can be gone in a moment. You can get in a car accident, you can get cancer, you can all of a sudden get blacklisted. Anything can happen this day and age, right? So just maintain who you are and continue to be yourself, but be a good self, be a good you, and remember that people are always watching you, even when you don't think they are. Somebody's watching you. And like I said, when that struggle happens and your character has to be revealed, who are you going to be?
Never before in all the episodes of me doing this podcast have I ever felt like the conversation I was having was a direct life message to some stuff happening in my current life.
I'm sorry, bro. I'm not
No. Honestly, there's just sometimes, I don't have to tell you, sometimes it's just a little harder to get out of bed. And sometimes you're like, oh, it's a day, like, for example, not to make it about me, but today's my day off from my regular job. And I'm like, I did 6 podcast interviews today, so it's like, there wasn't a day off today. And everyone's like, oh, when do you have a day off? I'm like, well, I have Thursday off as well, but I've got 3 more interviews. They're like, you're doing 10 interviews this week? I'm like, yeah, and it's just one of those things where I really I'm in tune with what you're saying about how to approach life and how to approach opportunities, because as much as I've been around the MMA world for 6-7 years, for so long, I was not saying yes to the opportunities. I was going, I don't think I'm ready. I can't do this. I can't do that. It's only been within the past couple of years where the word yes is the only it substitutes no in my life now. So I really appreciate that mindset. I want to, because again, I do want to get back to UFC 291, but I want to ask you something because it's very personal to me. And I love the fact that even for just a couple episodes, you were on it, and not enough people in the world know about the little run of Kingdom, the MMA show that was on. And I think it is so important. If I wanted to show someone what MMA was and they had no idea, I wouldn't bring up, Forrest Griffin, Stephen Bonner. If I wanted to tell the story of what a professional fighter goes through, I'd sit them down for all 3 seasons and I would say, hey, there's a little bit of Hollywood exaggeration in this, but this is the life of a fighter. When you got involved with that show and you saw everything that, you saw the storylines, as someone who's been around combat sports, been in boxing, been in MMA, did you like the fact that it was kind of very, very real?
It's got to be real. I mean, and I think we kind of live in a world of glorifying, amazing, right? But it's hard to see the work. It's like you see a guy at the top of the level, or and you're like, hey, man, that dude, he's a beast. But nobody sees the backstory, right? Everybody sees the tree, but they didn't see the seed. To see the seed and watch it grow, now you're seeing reality. And you can, when you can see reality, now you can start to put things together, and all the hard work, which is why I think the Ultimate Fighter is so neat, because it creates a relationship with these guys, indirectly, but you're watching the struggles that they go through. You're hearing about the home life. You're hearing about, oh, my wife's pregnant, or my girlfriend's pregnant, and she's about to give birth, but I'm here because I need to make a way for my family. I want to make a better life for my family. And throughout the history of boxing and sport, it's like everybody has come through some type of a struggle to get to where they are. And that's where all the work was put in. So now when they get to the top, now you got to work harder. Because I've always heard this, like being a baseball guy and working in professional baseball, it's easier to get to the big leagues than it is to stay in the big leagues. Right. Especially if you're a high round draft pick, you're on a fast track to the show. But staying up there and staying relevant is incredible. But if you look at Mike Piazza, I mean, he's a way late round draft pick, like 50. I don't know what it was exactly. You'll have to Google that one. But he was kind of a draft pick, like a favor. Like, we're going to pick him as a favor because we know his dad. Yeah. So he gets picked and he works his way up through the system and makes it to the big, becomes an all-star, becomes, one of the best hitters in Dodger history and sluggers in baseball. I mean, the dude dropped bombs. But nobody really knew that until they started to tell his story. So when you're talking about Kingdom, I mean, you're seeing the fruits of hard work and labor that goes into becoming successful in anything in life, not just MMA, So I think it's incredible, and I love that somebody came up with that idea. Let's do a show and let's make it as real as we can possibly make it, and it's gonna get dirty, Yeah. It's gonna get dirty. My mom
definitely did.
My mom called me after the finale. She never knew I was on the show. She called me after she watched the finale, not even knowing. Again, she didn't know I was on the show. She goes, "Did you know that you were the announcer for the Kingdom finale? That you did the?" And I said, "Mom, are you kidding me right now? Like, did I know? Yeah, I was there." But she cracks me up, man, because I don't really share anything I do. Like I said, I don't have social media, so it's easy for me to stay under the radar and feel a bit irrelevant often, which is kind of how I like it. I can walk into a store, nobody could care less about who I am, and if somebody recognizes me, I'll give them a chat, we'll spend a couple minutes together, and I might even give them my phone number. We end up becoming buddies and go mountain biking or something. It's happened. But that's how normal, regular Joe I am. It's like, I don't care about all that stuff. It's kind of silly to me that we glorify athletes. It kind of bothers me to the point of like, I sometimes don't want to watch. You know, when I retired from baseball, I couldn't watch baseball for a while. It was kind of, I was a bit like I broke up with my high school sweetheart. You know, it was like I retired. I felt like my wife made me retire because I wanted to travel, and I was a bit resentful about the whole situation. But once I got free, I don't want to say I was free of it. Once I got out of that grind, I was able to breathe. I felt like I could spend that quality time with my wife, spend the quality time with my kids, and actually be a dad. And that's where I'm at today. It's like, I just want to be a dad. You know, I want to watch my kids chase their dreams and help them along the way. You know, I want to be their cheerleader. You know, I want to glorify them. Like, you are, you know, you struggle, but because you struggle, you're going to get better. You know, if you struggle and you quit, you're never going to get better. You're never going to change. You're never going to be that metamorphosis of who you're supposed to become in life, because you're going to learn how to quit. And once you learn how to quit, that's the only thing you're ever going to do in life. So I love to see my kids struggle. I love to see them fail, because then I have a lesson that I can give them. It's a moment I can pour into them and encourage them that this is all temporary. You know, everything you're doing right now does matter because you're putting work in. But once you quit, all of it goes down the drain. So keep working hard.
That's beautifully said, and also feels like another direct message to me. So I'll take it. Now, kind of getting back into the sport, when we look at UFC 291, Jan Blachowicz, Alex Pereira, I mean, just as a fan, that fight is so exciting. I thought Dana might spoil us and give us, once the Jamal Hill news came out, I thought he may just throw the light heavyweight vacant title onto this card. I understand why he can't, but Alex Pereira, we know what he did with Israel Adesanya. Jan Blachowicz also owns, you know, victory over Israel Adesanya and was also former champ. I mean, how excited are you for this fight?
We froze for a minute. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just asking your excitement level of Jan Blachowicz and Alex Pereira.
Those, I mean, it doesn't get much better. You know, light heavyweight, that's a scrap right there, bro. And you said it. I mean, Adesanya, they both have W's over them. And gosh, dude, I'm not even picking, but I'm excited as heck, bro. I mean, that's gonna be fun. That's right. That's a main event, you know, easily. And like you said earlier, this card is stacked. I mean, there's a lot of great opportunity out there for somebody to really shine. And I think it could easily be, you know, the best card UFC history again.
Yeah.
You know, 2023 could be that year, bro, where it's just like blowout after blowout.
It reminds me a little bit. I'm trying to get my years together. I want to say 2015, the first card, UFC 205. You had UFC 190. I mean, just so many events through and through. And then obviously that was also part of the sale year. But yeah, you got Tony Ferguson, Bobby Green, Michael Chiesa, Kevin Holland. I mean, that's your main card opener. If that doesn't get you to sign up for ESPN Plus, I don't know what will. Steve Wonderboy Thompson against Michelle Pereira. I mean, there's just so many great fights at UFC 291. I wanted to ask, instead of just event-specific questions, let's talk about the UFC. And I'm a guy somewhat similar to yourself. I'm more of a football, basketball guy. I do follow baseball. I watch every freaking Red Sox game from Chicago. You would think I would just pick either Cubs or the Sox, but that's either here or there. But, you know, I'm a guy who I like the NFL, the NBA, and baseball, but I didn't feel like I just felt more of a reporter and not someone who had the opportunity to tell stories. And then I found MMA. And then slowly but surely, I got very lucky early on in this business to meet some great people who offered me a pathway to get to where I am today. And for me, being in this sport of MMA and around the UFC, well, not around the UFC, but watching the UFC, because I've never been, you know, credentialed to an event, but there's something special about what the UFC is doing, specifically with 2023. And that includes yourself. There's so many opportunities being landed to so many people. Yourself, obviously Bruce has been there for a very long time, but bringing in you, Justin Bernard, you have Laura Sanko, so many others, Laura Sanko is getting calls from the audience to, hey, we need her on a pay-per-view card with Joe Rogan and John Anik. And, I'm currently back in school and we're just starting one of our sports broadcasting courses. And they were like, what's your favorite announcing moment of all time, your broadcast moment? And I just wrote out Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman right behind me. John Anik saying that is not the cloth from which he is cut. The rest of the story is written in 30 seconds from there. When you look at what the UFC is doing by allowing so many different opportunities to so many different people from different walks of life, how happy does it make you as someone who has been in sports broadcasting for so long?
Yeah, I again, blessed, truly. When I started with WEC, I actually did a paper interview with my hometown, and that was one of the questions they asked me, based on my ambition. And when I was explaining, WEC was acquired by UFC, so we're under the same umbrella. And they're like, well, what would it take for you to be a UFC announcer? Would you want to be a UFC announcer? I said, well, I mean, that's the ultimate goal, right? But at the time, it just didn't seem to be a reality for me because, all respect to Bruce, I didn't never feel like I was going to get an opportunity. And when WEC merged and, the division got wiped out, I thought, well, it was fun. And I truly enjoyed the run and built so many relationships. Reed Harris still today is one of my favorite people. And fighters, Cub and Uriah, Chad Mendez. I mean, all these guys that I felt like we were the infants of MMA, and such a quality organization that you never wanted it to end. You just wanted to be a part of that moment forever. And when I wasn't offered an opportunity to come along, which is understandable, I felt like, well, like I said, it was fun. It was great. I learned a lot. I actually learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself, and even through a panic, like, okay, what am I going to do now? And when I left WEC, I mean, I got 25 promoters call me the next day and saying, hey, I got this show and this show. And I was like, oh yeah, great. I'm ready to jump at the bit. And nothing ever came through except for one. And that was Graham Boylan at Cage Warriors. And Graham says, hey, we want you to come over to Amman, Jordan. We're doing this show. And I'm like, Amman, Jordan? I mean, that's Middle East, man. I don't know about that. It's kind of dangerous, right? And I'm telling my wife, I said, well, I'm going to go do the show. I might not come back. And she's like, what? And then I'm like, and Graham's like, I secure you, dude. You're going to be fine. Don't even worry, because, the Prince here is part of it. And it's such a well-oiled machine now. Cage Warriors is, and still today, thriving, throughout Europe, that everything subsided as far as the fear went. And I truly grew to a whole nother level being with Cage Warriors for that time, for the 5 years we were together. And then, shortly after I left the WEC, UFC called me to wrap up Strike Force down in San Diego. So I went down and did that show when Cyborg annihilated the Japanese gal. I can't remember her name. And I thought, okay, cool. Maybe I'm back in their graces. And shortly after that, we signed in 2012 with Zuffa again. And I think I did 2 shows. My first being the Smashes in Australia, Ultimate Fighter finale, when Whitaker won it. And the rest is history. And I kind of just grinded along, throughout that course. Mainly I was doing boxing with Golden Boy Promotions. And when Golden Boy came along, it was like 99 fights over 2 years. So I was going to be really busy. And then Invicta came in the picture. And it's like things started to develop. And I think for me, it's like, okay, I didn't have to panic, because I've developed a way of doing what I do to make it viable and still something that I can count on. But a lesson I learned was don't let this career, what I'm doing, the announcing, become my bread. Let it be my pastime, my hobby, and have a livelihood. And my thing was like, what's my livelihood? I didn't really have a livelihood. And going back a little further, in 2002, I was a sports writer, sports editor for a small paper, still announcing baseball, doing fights a little bit here and there. And there was a TV show that came out, and it was called The Next Great Champ. It was on Fox. It was Oscar De La Hoya. And they went around and found a bunch of fighters that had no business really in the ring, and developed a TV show. They all lived together. It was kind of like, you know, the next great champ. It was who's going to be the next face of boxing. And none of them are never really made it anywhere, unfortunately. But it was a moment where I said, okay, they offered this show. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna do it. I quit my job as a sports writer because I just wanted to get out and really give this announcing thing a true effort. And thank God it worked out, because I had no course of action. I didn't know what I was going to do if it didn't. And you know, and then of course, you know, I'm doing the show a week, and then almost 2 years after that, we get the call and there's no more shows. I'm like, oh my God, I'm right back in the same boat where I didn't want to be. I put all my eggs in that basket. So now what am I going to do? But I'm a go-getter, brother. I will find a way to make a buck. You know, I started a Christmas light installation business, and I did that for 5 years. And I started with 24 homes, and I'm a perfectionist. By the third year, I had 300 houses, and you know, that was my gig from November 1 until January 15th. Put them up, take them down, and see you next year. So that really spoke a lot. You know, not to pat myself on the back, but that spoke a lot about my own character to myself. Like, you know what, there isn't anything that I can't do without God, because he gave me the thoughts and the mindset that all things are possible with him. And when I truly put my trust in God in 2012, when I got saved, my life started becoming so much better, and things that mattered to me more when I was living a secular lifestyle became so insignificant to me. And I didn't panic anymore. I was no longer worried about, well, this promotion fell through, or this show didn't happen, or these guys didn't call. It's like, okay, God removes me from things and he puts me in things. You know, I was doing ACB, the Russian organization, did a couple shows for them, and they offered me a massive deal. And I was like, sweet, let's go. And I went down to Brazil, did a show, came home. They said, get your passport or visa for Azerbaijan and get a second passport. And we're sending you your flight details. We'll be there in 2 weeks. Well, week one goes by, I get all my stuff done, expedited, paid $1,500. And the second week I'm calling, I'm like, I don't have a flight. And well, Joe, we're not going to use you. I said, no, but you offered me the deal. And what am I going to do? So while I spent about 7 days complaining about it, finally I heard God just say, shut up. Stop worrying about all these things that you have no control over, and let me handle it. You know, and it sounds bizarre. And if you had told me as a non-believer this story, I'd have been like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I can attest to it because I was a non-believer. I believed in a higher power. I didn't believe in God. But when I heard that voice saying, let me handle it, is when I said, okay, I'm going to give it to God, because that's what I've always heard. Give it to God and let him take care of it. He will fight your battles for you. And I said, okay, I'm going to give it to you, God, and I'm going to quit talking about it. And I did. And 10 days later, I got a call from PFL. They offered me a big deal. Okay. 2 days after that, I got a call for a movie. Cool. So I got to do a movie. And then the Kingdom finale, call me for the Kingdom. I'm like, okay, everything's fine again. What was I so worried about? Because I was freaked out because I have these kids that I'm raising. I'm the only provider for my family. My wife isn't working, and we're living in an entirely new state. We moved to Georgia at this time, and there was so much ambiguity that I could have fallen apart, and I really was. And I sat with my wife and I said, I don't know what we're gonna do. And she says, well, what have you done with it? Have you given it to God, or are you just holding on to it? And I said, well, I haven't given it to him, but I kind of have. And then, you know, when I heard that voice say, just give it to him, I did it. And God, I mean, if there isn't a God, well, then there's some other high power that is working for me, you know, and not against me. And I'll take my chances in saying that there is, and I'm gonna trust that, because in the end, if there is a heaven and I make it, well, I did the right thing. And if there isn't, and then whatever, I lived a good life, you
Yeah.
know. So I'll take my chance in believing in the Lord and trusting Him with my life than trusting Joe Martinez with my life, because he makes a lot of mistakes, you know.
I think your path is very well carved out in a positive manner, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. Before I let you go, I do got to get your thoughts on Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, and just from a human side, when you talk about how, as fans of the sport and people inside this combat sports world, we can talk about it from a technical standpoint and all that. But when you talk about kind of just the stuff that you're talking about, second chances, finding God, all those life happenings, right? Errol Spence, what most people will not want to talk about is he shouldn't be in this fight.
Right.
I mean, you talked about when you get the money and everything, and you love having all the brand new toys and everything. And I don't know if Errol Spence is driving a Toyota Corolla, if he's Errol Spence, the boxer, anymore. You know, part of that supercar may have saved him. And, with that being said, this is one of the best boxing fights we've seen in a while, especially at a lower weight class. What do you make of this fight?
I think it's going to be fun. I know it's a money fight. I know Terence Crawford stepped past Alexis Rocha, which I was really hoping that fight was going to happen. Alexis has proven himself. He's a Santa Ana kid. I always say Santana, and that's just being an OC Santa Ana guy. But I felt like he really deserved a shot to fight Terence Crawford, and I know that was close to being done. But when Spence got in the picture and, the money became the issue of it all, I can't blame him for taking the bread, So Terence Crawford has a great opportunity here to continue his dominance. Spence, a second chance, at life, with what he's gone through, and how does he respond? We'll see. But that should be a really fun, exciting fight to watch. And, we're stacked up this weekend, and it happens often that we'll get a really good boxing match and a really good UFC card, on the same night. And thank God we have streaming available, and we can, we can watch them both at the same time. There's no more, I got to pick one, So we're in a great day and age with technology where we're at today. I mean, you and I are talking video. When I was a kid, the Jetsons were doing this. This is amazing, man. And we're like, dang, that would be so cool. Well, here we are living it, man. All we're missing is flying cars, right?
That's it.
We already got robots and stuff doing everything else.
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
Right.
and it's great because, I mean, like you talk about the technology and the streaming we have, the local establishment I go to watch all my fights. I'm like, hey guys, the place closer to my house, it's a little bit more convenient. They're not getting Spence Crawford, which means I'm coming here because I have the poster hanging up. I got it from you guys. So I know you're going to have it, right? They're like, we don't know. Like, how are we going to do it? I go, it's a great thing that I love this combat sports world so much. Here's what you're going to do. Every other TV, UFC, boxing. You're going to put on the boxing main event audio, and then the UFC will happen after that, and everything's fine. And he's like, yeah, I guess we should just hire you to run the TV system.
Exactly. I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, Mike, what are you doing, bro?
I'm like, it's just that simple. You just every other TV, and then boxing main event first, and then UFC main event. I go, everybody will be fine. And he's like, yeah, I guess that makes the most sense. So it's great, and it's so good for the sport. And I say this not to blow smoke, but I've had an opportunity to go to UFC events and other organizations. I've yet to go to an event in Vegas. And I have yet to go to a Joe Martinez announced event. So that's now on the bucket list. I got to get down to Vegas. I got to be there for one of your shows. I really appreciate, as much as we could have talked technically and previewed and all of this stuff, I enjoy a true, genuine conversation. And sometimes those are the best conversations. And I think this one was one of them. I'm going to throw a bonus one at you because you've seen this man in the sport that you currently are in. As well as he is now going over to boxing, and that's Francis Ngannou. And I know he left the UFC on bad terms, but when you talk about a guy, and I've gone back and forth on if I'm going to write a big piece on it, but when you talk about a guy who just bet on himself, which is something we've been talking about through and through, and literally became the golden ticket himself. He is his own jackpot. I mean, how crazy of a story is Francis Ngannou to you? And how happy are you for him? And what do you make of him going into the boxing world?
I I mean, look, if you're going to be successful in anything, you got to believe in you first, right? Because you're going to have all the people saying you're the greatest, you're the greatest, but if it doesn't come to you, you're going to be who you think you are. You're not going to perform at your level that you're capable of. But he believes in himself, and that's number one. And then taking the chance and stepping out of his comfort zone, is another. That's number two. So I think he's building himself up to be a mega fighter. I think he's going to land himself some great opportunities to make a lot of coin, more than he could ever imagine. But on a personal level, I've seen him. My kid does jujitsu at Extreme Couture in Vegas. My daughter does kickboxing there. And my son has a buddy at school who was getting bullied a lot, 12 years old. And he had tried to commit suicide. And I called my buddy Eric, who runs, the Extreme Couture over there. And I said, Eric, I got to get this kid.
And
oh, you're great. I love him. I love Eric. He's freaking fantastic, a great human being. And he says, bring him in. So I bring him in. He comes with his mom, and my kid's there, my wife's there. And bro, I mean, I'm in tears just talking to Eric, and then seeing Francis come over. And Francis is 6'30", and he comes over and he grabs the kid and he says, come here. So they go for a walk. They're going for like 15 minutes. And he comes back, and you just see a whole new life in this kid. And then I'm like, he's gonna be okay. Like, he's gonna be all right. And I'm not I was so impressed with that moment that I'm an Ngannou fan on a human level, not the fighter fan. I'm a human fan of Francis Ngannou. And I mean, I after seeing that moment, I'm like, I would do any, if he called me and says, Joe, I need you to change the tire on my car, I'd be like, dude, I'm gonna change all four of them. I'll rotate them. I'm gonna get you some new tire, whatever it's gonna take, because I'm such a human fan of you. And seeing what you did in a life that probably, wouldn't matter to you, and someone else, because we live in a world of being selfish. What can I do for me? How can I build me bigger? Me. We're in a me time. And common courtesy has gone by the wayside. I think even tipping your waiters has kind of gone away too. It's like, we've got to take care of each other, and we've got to continue to build people up. And then Eric brings the kid in. It's the pro session. It's on a Monday, and the end of the pro training, he brings him over. He says, hey, come over. He brings him in the middle, and he said, Eric starts to pour into him, and he says, you're not alone, and we want you to know that you have family, and it's not the family that's in your home. Yes, that's your family. That's your mom and dad. That's your brother, but we're your family here. And he says, we get each other. We back each other. We pick each other up when we fall. And I was just like, oh my gosh, bro. And it hit me to another point of just like complete respect and adoration for what they're doing there. They're not just building professional fighters, they're building character into people. They're instilling values and helping people to believe in themselves when nobody else will, and I have the highest amount of respect for them, and we'll continue to be a part of that family too. I love it. And all praise to Francis and his heart. And, I don't know his upbringing, what he struggled with or anything like that, but to see that moment with that kid, it really elevated him in my life, to look at him on a whole nother level outside of the ring or a cage.
Well, this was definitely a lot harder hitting than I anticipated, because I can say this openly. I'm usually pretty open about some of my stuff, but Eric Nixick also did something very similar for me during the COVID time when, I was working at SiriusXM, and then COVID hit and I wasn't sure what was happening. And then I was like, I need to get out. And I had just recently lost my best friend to drugs. And then Eric was like, yeah, I think you should stay doing what you're doing with this podcast and everything. And he was like, and I'm going to help you out. And literally over the course of a few days, I was getting interviews booked left and right with some of the best names to ever, grace that Extreme Couture gym. And I still feel indebted to him. And, that's, for me, it's not like, I'm 31 and I have so many friends that like to live the party lifestyle. And it's not beside me to go out and have a drink and watch the fights and enjoy, life. But, everyone's always like, man, you got to get to Vegas. Like, you got to get to Vegas. You're a fight guy. You got to get to Vegas. I'm like, yeah, but like you guys are saying it because you guys want me to do the pool parties and the bars and all and the clubs. I'm like, I just want to go to the gym and I just want to thank the people who have helped me, with this show. And I want to go to an event and, I don't expect to get access to everywhere, but that's okay because I just want to take it all in. So, Joe Martinez, I just want to say thank you for this conversation because it's a lot different. And it's actually the conversation I prefer to have on this show because, not to put anyone on a pedestal, but, and it's not saying, oh, it's just because I'm a UFC guy or an MMA guy, but I really, as a broadcaster, enjoy the way Joe Rogan can break down people's walls and have them talk about life in ways that we don't expect them to. So many times I'm doing these interviews on behalf of coaches or managers or promotions to promote their next fight. I want the opportunity to talk to people like yourself about life and how they got here and who you are when you step in there and you're announcing some of these best fighters in the world. So I truly do appreciate your time today. And I will say I'm a human fan of yours, very much so. And definitely have to get down to Vegas and get to an event that you'll be at, because that is this is why talking to you today is exactly why I got into the sport. And it's a nice reminder.
I appreciate that, Mike. That's awesome. I truly appreciate the compliment, and it's been my pleasure, and I love what you're doing. Keep pushing forward, man. And, you're going to make it. You're going to make it to where you're supposed to be, and you're always at where you're supposed to be, unless you try to defy the laws of gravity, and then you're probably making a mistake and you're going to end up on your face somewhere. But I think if you continue down the road you're on and the trajectory that you're on, you're going to, sky's the limit. Or as Jordan says, the ceiling's the limit. Or the ceiling's the sky.
Yes.
I forget what he said, but it was the greatest quote I've ever heard that I've misquoted. And I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
Enjoy the fights this weekend. Going to be a hell of a weekend. Like I said, 3 events. Bellator Rising. They got some great fights over there. We've got Spence, Crawford. We got UFC 291. Joe Martinez. Hopefully we can do this again in the future. And really appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, man.